Everybody to the 10th day of the session, Tuesday, January 24th, 2023. I'm going to give people a bit of a minute to get here on the floor before I call for the roll call. So we'll see if we get a few more folks in their seats. Chief Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Convening roll call for the 10th day, January 24th, 2023. Alamand? Present. Allred? Here. Andrew? Here. Angelos? Here. Banks? Here. Bear?
Excused.
Berger? Here. Brown? Here. Burkhart? Here. Byron?
Excused.
Chadwick? Here. Chestick? Here. Clouston? Here. Conrad? Here. Crago? Here. Davis? Here. Eklund?
Excused.
Haroldson? Here. Harshman?
Excused.
Heiner? Here. Henderson?
Excused.
Hornock? Here. Jennings? Here. Knapp? Here. Larson Lloyd?
Excused.
Larson JT? Here. Lawley? Here. Locke?
Excused.
Nyman? Here. Newsom? Excused. Nicholas?
Excused.
Nemec? Here. Northrup?
Excused.
Oakley?
Excused.
Obermueller? Here. O'Hearn?
Here.
Olson?
Here.
Ottman? Here. Pendergraft?
Here.
Penn? Here. Provenza? Here. Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood?
Excused.
Singh? Here. Slagle?
Excused.
Smith? Here. Stith?
Excused.
Storer?
Excused.
Strock?
Excused.
Stivar?
Present.
Tarver?
Here.
Trujillo? Here. Walters?
Excused.
Ward? Here. Washut?
Here.
Western?
Here.
Winter?
Here.
Wiley?
Here.
Yin?
Here.
Zwanitzer Dan?
Excused.
Zwanitzer Dave?
Excused.
Speaker Summers?
Here. We'll keep the roll call open until after the whole play ball segment. There's still at least two committees, maybe three committees, two committees out. I'd like to welcome Pastor Carl Picard of Capital City, Pastor Carl Picard of Capital City Church to lead us in our prayer of the day. Please rise.
Join with me as we join with the writer of the scripture who prayed this prayer. For this reason, I bow my knees before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth derives its name, that he would grant you, according to the riches of his glory, to be strengthened with power through his Spirit in the inner man, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, and that you, being rooted and grounded in love, may be able to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth and length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ, which surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled up to all fullness of God. Now to him who is able to do far more abundantly beyond all that we ask or think, according to the power that works within us, to him be the glory in the church and in Christ Jesus to all generations, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor Picard. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let her go! Thank you, appreciate it. The House will please come to order. Chief Clerk, will you please finish the roll?
Bear. Byron. Eklund. Harshman. Henderson. Larson Lloyd. Locke. Nicholas. Northrup. Oakley. Sherwood. Slagle. Stith. Storer. Strock. Walters. Zwanitzer Dan. Zwanitzer Dave. 61 present, 1 excused.
This morning, we are joined by a special guest who has committed his life to keeping others safe. Mr. Bill Law has served as a Torrington firefighter for the last 60 years, acting as the president and assistant fire chief. He is trained in fire suppression, water rescue and recovery, farm and auto accident recovery, and is a certified EMT and wildland fire practice. Fellow representatives, please help me welcome Mr. Bill Law to the House, and he will be introduced by former representative, but now a senator, my senator, Senator Baldwin. Senator Baldwin. Senator, privilege of the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And really, I don't want to talk much because I don't have much of a voice. It's an honor to be back. There's a few familiar faces in here. They're still ugly. They haven't changed. It's my honor today to introduce to you Mr. Bill Law. Makes me tired just reading his resume. If you can imagine being a firefighter for 60 years, being woke up in the middle of the night, think of your most comfortable place where you're in bed and it's warm and you're sound asleep and the tone goes off. Imagine yourself in the grocery store with a cart full of groceries and the tone goes off. Pretty much imagine yourself doing anything that you want to do, anywhere where you want to be. That's when the tone goes off. And all these guys up in the gallery, we have a lot of firemen up here with us today. They'll all shake their heads that that's very true. That's the way it works. When you're having your favorite dinner, that's when the tone goes off. As I like to tell my wife, that's why I started eating frozen burritos. I didn't care if I left them. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Law. We'll let him speak some words here to you. I won't go through his whole resume because it'll make you tired and it'll make me even harder to hear. I know some of you don't think that's a good thing that I can't talk, but please welcome Mr. Bill Law.
Wow, what a humbling and honoring moment this is for me. None of us do this on our own, but I would like to say good morning to the Wyoming House of Representatives. It is certainly my honor to be here, and thank you for your work and your service to the state of Wyoming. And for my fellow firefighters that came over to be with me to recognize my activities, I don't want them to tell you all they know about me, because think about this. What young person in the world has not wanted to ride on a fire truck? I've been doing it for 60 years, and they still let me ride on the truck. They don't let me drive much anymore. So I do want to thank you all. This is really a great honor, and I do want to recognize the fact that none of us do what we do on our own. I want to thank my wife, wasn't able to be with me, but yes, she's the one. We were married after I was on the fire department. She said, "Honey, I just thought you would be over it by now." she's been incredible putting up with me all these years and our two children. So thank you for this opportunity to meet with you, and it's a great honor. Thank you very much.
The House will please come to order. First, I would like to thank Bill Law for his over 60 years of service to the state of Wyoming and to those in his area. What a wonderful thing. I want to thank all the firefighters out there. Some of them are leaving now, that for all their service, for helping our communities. It is much appreciated. It's when you see those guys showing up, if you're in need, it's a wonderful thing. With that, I believe we have some privileges of the floor. So Majority Whip Western,
Mr. Speaker, privilege of the floor.
please.
Thank you very much. Members, here in our South Gallery, we've got Mr. Brad Bauer. He's a Sheridan guy, and he's the director of our local land trust. So if we could stand and acknowledge him and all the other land trusts that are up in the gallery for all the great work that they do in our communities.
Minority Leader Yin,
Privilege of the floor, Mr. Speaker.
please.
So members, in the rear gallery, we have folks from all over the state that have come to participate in the Equality State Policy Center's Shape Wyoming program. That program brings Wyomingites from across the state to learn about the legislature and become citizen advocates. So all the folks that have come here to meet you and learn how you work, please give them a nice warm welcome.
Welcome to the House. Representative Slagle,
Privilege to the floor.
please.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I would like to introduce my two youngest daughters in the South Gallery, right there by my wife. And they're down here. We homeschool, so this will be a week of intensive government for them.
Welcome to the House. Representative Strzok,
I would like to introduce some very special people to me. I've got Don Larson and Bill Tibbs. And Bill Tibbs is a former representative, served 8 years. And again, what years was it, Bill?
85 to 92.
So I would like to, everyone welcome them, please.
Welcome back, Representative Tibbs. Journal Committee report.
Your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of January 20th, 2023 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Representatives Ward and Chestick.
We're at that order of business of introduction, reading, and reference of bills. The first bill for our consideration is House Bill 212.
House Bill 212, sponsored by Representative Pendergraft.
First reading of the bill.
Statutory Standing Committees, Federal Review.
House Bill 212 is referred to Committee Number 1, Judiciary. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 214.
House Bill 214, sponsored by Representative Andrew.
First reading of the bill.
General Regulatory Sandbox Program.
House Bill 214 is referred to Committee Number 1, Judiciary. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 89.
House Bill 89, sponsored by State Investment Returns Adequate Serving Reserve Funding.
First reading of the bill.
State Investment Returns Adequate Reserve Funding.
House Bill 89 is referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 195.
House Bill 195, sponsored by Appropriations.
First reading of the bill.
American Rescue Plan Act Appropriations Amendments.
House Bill 195 is referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 208.
House Bill 208, sponsored by House Appropriations.
First reading of the bill.
School Foundation Program Reserve Account Investments.
House Bill 208 is referred to Committee Number 3, Revenue. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 177.
House Bill 177, sponsored by Representative Harshman.
First reading of the bill.
Expulsion for possession of a deadly weapon.
House Bill 177 is referred to Committee Number 4, Education. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 198.
House Bill 198, sponsored by Representative Conrad.
First reading of the bill.
Civil Service Commission Administration.
The next bill for our consideration, House Bill 198 is referred to Committee Number 5, Agriculture. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 217.
House Bill 217, sponsored by Representative Newsom.
First reading of the bill.
Trophy game animal, change to large carnivore game animal.
House Bill 217 is referred to Committee Number 5, Agriculture. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 200.
House Bill 200, sponsored by Representative Northrup.
First reading of the bill.
Non-resident hunting licenses, application fees.
House Bill 200 is referred to Committee Number 6, Travel. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 218.
House Bill 218, sponsored by Representative Winder.
First reading of the bill.
Jackson Hole Rodeo and Fairgrounds, State Historic Site.
House Bill 218 is referred to Committee Number 6, Travel. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 203.
House Bill 203, sponsored by Representative Obermueller.
First reading of the bill.
PMTF and CLPLF, Reserve Accounts, Appeal and Simplification.
House Bill 203 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 204.
House Bill 204, sponsored by Representative Chestick.
First reading of the bill.
Allowable train lengths.
House Bill 204 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 197.
House Bill 197, sponsored by Representative Andrew.
First reading of the bill.
Defend the Guard Act.
House Bill 197 is referred to Committee Number 8, Transportation. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 199.
House Bill 199, sponsored by Representative Conrad.
First reading of the bill.
License plate decal, breast cancer awareness.
House Bill 199 is referred to Committee Number 8, Transportation. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 196.
House Bill 196, sponsored by Representative Henderson.
First reading of the bill.
Wyoming Infrastructure Protection Act.
House Bill 196 is referred to Committee Number 9, Minerals. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 210.
House Bill 210, sponsored by Representative Nyman.
First reading of the bill.
Financial Institution Discrimination.
House Bill 210 is referred to Committee Number 9, Minerals. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 202.
House Bill 202, sponsored by Representative Walters.
First reading of the bill.
Pilot student loan payments.
House Bill 202 is referred to Committee Number 10, Labor. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 206.
House Bill 206, sponsored by Representative Yin.
First reading of the bill.
State employee child care.
House Bill 206 is referred to Committee Number 10, Labor. I got to check one thing. So I thought there were a couple off of this list, and they were sitting there, so. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 201.
House Bill 201, sponsored by Representative Northrup.
First reading of the bill.
Hathaway Fallen First Responder Scholarship.
House Bill 201 is referred to Committee Number 4, Education. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 215.
House Bill 215, sponsored by Representative Allemand.
First reading of the bill.
Property tax exemptions, elderly and veterans.
House Bill 215 is referred to Committee Number 3, Revenue. All right. Reports from standing committees.
House Bill 30, sponsored by Education, Wyoming Tomorrow's Scholarship Program Amendments, an act relating to the Wyoming Tomorrow's Scholarship Program. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 2 Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 30, Wyoming's Tomorrow Scholarship Program Amendments, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Henderson, Larson, Nicholas, Sherwood, Stith, Walters, Zwanitzer. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. House Bill 159, sponsored by Representative Larson Lloyd. Department of Fire Protection and Electrical Safety Fees, an act relating to fire protection and electrical safety. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom is referred House Bill 159, Department of Fire Protection and Electrical Safety Fees, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Banks, Burkhart, Conrad, Heiner, Knapp, Larson, Lawley, Tarver, Western. Representative Burkhart, Chairman.
No re-referrals, right? We're at that order of business of bills on second reading. The first bill for our consideration is House Bill 2.
House Bill 2, sponsored by Representative Heiner. Town Officers Salary Waiver, an act relating to cities and towns.
House Bill 2 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 93.
House Bill 93, sponsored by Water. Omnibus Water Bill Construction, an act relating to water development projects.
House Bill 93 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. We're at that order of business of bills on third reading and final passage. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Chairman, I move third reading bills for final passage, bills numbered HB 10, HB 15, HB 65, HB 67, HB 86, HB 94, and HB 96.
House Bill 65 has an amendment, so it'll be pulled off. So would anyone like any of these bills removed from the consent list? Obviously, 65 is removed from the consent list because it has an amendment. Will the reading clerk read the bills on the consent list?
House Bill 10, sponsored by Judiciary, County Officers, Bond Amounts, and Surety Requirement, an act relating to county officers being enacted by the Legislature of the State of Wyoming. House Bill 15, sponsored by Judiciary, County Authority to Dissolve Museum Boards, clarification, an act relating to counties being enacted by the Legislature of the State of Wyoming. House Bill 67, sponsored by Representative Stivar, special license plates decals, women veterans, an act relating to motor vehicles being enacted by the Legislature of the State of Wyoming. House Bill 86, sponsored by Blockchain, disclosure of private cryptographic keys, an act relating to digital assets being enacted by the Legislature of the State of Wyoming. House Bill 94, sponsored by Representative Rodriguez Williams, Board of Parole, Wyoming Residency, an act relating to criminal procedure being enacted by the Legislature of the State of Wyoming. House Bill 96, sponsored by Representative Crago, transfer on death deed insurance coverage, an act relating to insurance and probate being enacted by the Legislature of the State of Wyoming.
Having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall these bills pass the House? The chief clerk will call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Clauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom excused. Nicholas? Nemec? Northrop? Oakley? Obermueller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stiff? Storer? Strzok? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers?
Aye.
Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 61 aye, 1 excused. As for House Bill 10, are there any changes? Hornock? Aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 60 aye, 1 no, 1 excused. As for House Bill 15, are there any changes? Locke, aye to no. Nyman, aye to no. Jennings, aye to no. Heiner, aye to no. Knapp, aye to no. Winter, aye to no. Bear. Aye to no. Strock. Aye to no. Stivar. Aye to no. Allemand. Aye to no. Tarver. Aye to no. Rodriguez Williams. Aye to no. Ward. Aye to no. Angelos. Aye to no. Haroldson. Aye to no. Slagle. Aye to no. Smith. Aye to no. Andrew. Aye to no. Penn. Aye to no. Singh. Aye to no. Ottman. Aye to no. Stith. Aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 39 aye, 22 no, 1 excused. As for House Bill 67, are there any changes? Any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 61 aye, 1 excused. As for House Bill 86, are there any changes? Crago, aye to no. Warnock, aye to no. Slagle, aye to no. Stivar, aye to no. Winter, aye to no. Jennings, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 55 aye, 6 no, 1 excused. As for House Bill 94, are there any changes? Walters, aye to no. Zwanitzer Dan, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 59 aye, 2 no, 1 excused. As for House Bill 96, are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 61 aye, 1 excused.
You're done, right? Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 10, 15, 67, 86, 94, and 96 have passed the House. Privilege? Okay. Rep Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would move, according to House Rule 7.3, to move House Bill 65 back for one additional day, lay back for one additional day, please.
Without objection, it's so ordered. Okay. So general file. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, I think we're at Committee of the Whole.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the House resolve itself into Committee of the Whole.
All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Motion carries. Representative Berger. If we have him.
The Committee of the Whole, please come to order. First bill for consideration is House Bill number 51. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 51, sponsored by Management Council, Legislator Constituent Service Allowance, an act relating to the legislature. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2 appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 51, Legislator Constituent Service Allowance. Respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Henderson, Larson, Nicholas, Sherwood, Stiff, Walters, Swanitzer. Representative Nicholas, Chairman.
Yep, you have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I move that when the Committee of the Whole rise and report, it does so with the recommendation that House Bill 51 do pass. And I will turn the explanation of the bill over to the good speaker, although I see him in the hallway over there, so someone needs to grab him. Here we go.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the 67th, I bring you House Bill 51, Legislator Constituent Service Allowance, and ask for your favorable consideration. So during the interim, the Management Council looked at a variety of, in fact, there was a subcommittee on legislative pay and legislative compensation. And the idea behind that was to examine all of those things related to how we are compensated in the Wyoming legislature. And so one of the bills that came out of Management Council for the body to consider was this idea of raising our legislative constituent service allowance. So kind of a bit of the history on that. At one time, you had to submit all your receipts for everything you did, and then you were approved up to a certain amount. And it's been this $750. So if you look on page 2 of the bill, you'll see currently we get $750 per quarter for compensation for constituent allowance, and that really is to move around your district, to provide updates, to provide press releases, whatever those costs are that get you around in your district and your voice out to your constituents. So it's been $750 according to our staff since 2002, and so Management Council decided the time was now to take a look at this, as costs have increased for those of us here as well as everywhere, and so Management Council decided to raise that to $1,000 and bring that forward in the bill. And so this is basically what it is. It's a $250 jump. It hasn't been raised since 2002. You'll see the effective date. So the effective date is actually after the next election. So it would come into effect for the next legislature. So none of us would benefit from this right now. So that's kind of the bill in a nutshell. I would certainly stand for any questions.
Question being called. What is your pleasure? Oh, sorry. Question. All those in favor of Chairman Nicholas's motion, the Committee of the Whole rise to report, that do so with the recommendation that House Bill 51 do pass. Say aye. All opposed? No. The chair's in question. Call. Call for division. All those in favor, please stand. All those opposed, please stand. The vote is 30 to 29. House Bill 51 has passed the committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 81. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 81, sponsored by Representative Larson Lloyd. Hospital supplemental payments, statutory fix, an act relating to medical assistance and services. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, to whom is referred House Bill 81, hospital supplemental payments, statutory fix, respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Chadwick, Klauston, O'Hearn, Yin, Zwanitzer. Noes, Representatives Hornock, Penn, Trujillo, Ward. Representative Zwanitzer, Chairman. This bill was re-referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 81, Hospital Supplemental Payment Statutory Fix. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Henderson, Larson, Nicholas, Sherwood, Stith, Walters, Zwanitzer. Representative Nicholas, Chairman.
I know we have the.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Folks, there's an update on your committee of the whole list. If you look at the website, it is updated. I had several legislators come to me and want to move some things around, give them a little bit more time. So here is your new list. If you want to write it down, or you can look at the general file list, it is updated. We just did 51. We're going to work on 81. Then we're going to go to 21, 76, 97, 82, 90, 142, and then you can look at the rest of the list. It'll follow on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bill we're working on right now is number 81. Then next bill on file will be 21. After that, 76, and then 97, 82, 90, 142, and then on into 134 and on down, or so as it is amended.
You heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Zwanitzer?
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move in the Committee of the Whole rise to report and do so with the recommendation that House Bill 81 do pass. I further would move the Standing Committee amendment and turn over sponsorship of the bill and the Standing Committee amendment to the good Vice Chairman of Appropriations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Folks, as we get into House Bill 81, which has to deal with supplemental payment limits, we call these UPL bills. I need to give you a little bit of history and a little bit of understanding on what an upper payment limit is and how it applies to Medicaid and the providers in the state. So we will talk a lot as we go through the session, as we get into this more about Medicare, and then we also talk about Medicaid. Pretty easy to get them confused. Medicare is a federal insurance program that's run entirely by the federal government. States not involved at all. When Medicare reimburses those of us who've reached that age of being on Medicare, they're saying for a service, we will reimburse the provider up to a limit. So, and they call that the upper payment limit. And so if I go in and I have this procedure and my provider goes and submits that payment, Medicare will reimbursing no more than that upper payment limit. Medicare's has oversight by CMS, Center for Medicaid Services. Center for Medicaid Services also has oversight for Medicaid. Medicaid, the difference there is that's a partnership between the state and the federal government in providing health care benefits to those who are eligible to receive them. So if a person's on Medicaid, the funding to reimburse the provider for those services is, in Wyoming, is 50% is paid for by the state, 50% is paid for by the federal government. They call that reimbursement an FMAP, Federal Medical something percentage, and Wyoming is 50-50. So CMS, this governing body for Medicare and Medicaid, says on this agreement we have with the state, we'll reimburse state, but we will not reimburse any more than the upper payment limit that we allow for over in our Medicare side. And so there's some boundaries there that are set. So what happens in Wyoming is if you pick the procedure in your mind, but if the upper payment limit for a procedure was $200, in Wyoming, where we match 50-50, 50% of that money coming from state general fund, we may not have the ability to fund Medicaid to where it can get reimbursed for that total 200. It might be 150. So 50% of that is coming in from the state, $75 from CMS equals $150. We're leaving $50 on the table that the providers could get. So hospitals, dentists, all of these people that provide services to Medicaid eligible patients are limited on how much they can then get reimbursed. Back in 2016, there was an innovative idea that was brought to that came nationwide through the Hospitals Association, and they said, okay, we get it. States may not have the ability to fund to where we can capture that upper payment limit, but what if? What if we as an association assessed ourselves a fee, let's just say in this instance, $25, that then would go to the Department of Health, so that increases that 50-50 in this example from 75 to 100, then CMS would reimburse to 100. We're now at that upper payment limit. We captured $25 of that was left on the table that then gets redistributed back to the hospitals. And that's what these supplemental payments do is, and we have them for hospitals, we have them for nursing homes who have Medicaid patients. We also have them for the private ambulance services that pick up and provide services to Medicaid eligible people, to where, because the common concern and the common complaint is that Medicaid oftentimes does not reimburse at a level that really takes care of the costs of the provider. So when they assess this fee to themselves, they're capturing more of that money and enables them to cover more of their costs. In 2016, this was a new program, and we put in language in there that said upon authorization from CMS, you can do this program. Since that time, CMS has approved, they say this works good. But in our statutes, we have to go back every year for the hospitals and make a request for authorization. CMS doesn't require it. They don't need it, but we just have it in our statutes. And so one of the things that we do in this bill is we say that this has been satisfied to where we don't have to have that footnote in the budget bill each time. Now, the other upper payment limit programs that I mentioned, one for nursing homes and one for ambulances, does not have that requirement. They came later. Their authorization are in statute, which is where, if you look on page 5, I believe it is, of the bill, you will see some new language that says that this has been satisfied. Yep, on section 1, approval of the state plan, on bottom of page 4 and on top of page 5. That new language is to say that we put into statute to where we don't have to have that footnote for the hospital upper payment limit program each year. Now, this year, one of the things that has been a challenge also is the Hospital Association came to us and they says, we have a hospital in the state that is part of this upper payment limit group who also provides psychiatric reasonable treatment facilities. These are psychiatric facilities that handle adolescents with high behavioral needs or psychiatric needs. Could be placed there through courts, could be placed there through families taking them there. Those psychiatric services are not part of this upper payment limit plan. This bill modifies the hospital upper payment limit plan to include those. And it would also include the psychiatric treatment facility just to the north of us here in where the Trailblazers live. So that's the other big change in this. Now, it's important that you remember that this assessment and this proposal was brought to us by the providers, by the hospitals who are in this program. And if you will look on your bill on page 3, there's an increase in administration expenses because of the increased burden on the Department of Health. The association says we will allow them to increase from 1% to 3% of the aggregated assessment from the hospitals to be used for administration. And then down at the bottom of 3, they raise that they have the ability to raise the net patient revenue each fiscal year from 0.5% to 1%. The last part of the bill is the Department of Health. Then, when we first come up with this in 2016, the Department of Health was handling the administration of these upper payment limit programs, which there was only one at the time in-house. But now that we have the hospital services, and it's been expanded to PRTFs, to the nursing home and the ambulance services, they are requesting an additional employee for that. And at this time, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move the standing committee amendment, which is applicable in this section of the bill. If you'll turn to the bill and note on page 7, line 10, this was a good catch in the committee, is there's an appropriation for $97,660 that come from federal funds to the Department of Health. That is the biennial amount. That needs to be changed to $48,830 to reflect an annual amount that would be carried over and the origin of the fund or federal funds. And then we also allow, if you look down on line 9, it talks about authorizing it for this act, and it needs to include the Hospital Act, as well as, and we would amend it to say, the Wyoming Nursing Care Facility Assessment, this act, which is the Hospital Assessment Act, and the Ground Ambulance Service Provider Act. So, Mr. Chairman, with that explanation, I'd call for, or I'd answer any questions on the amendment or ask for a question.
Question, Representative Stiver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Being on the committee during the interim, on and against this amendment. None of this was discussed during the interim committee meetings on this bill. It was strictly the two facilities. So I'd like an explanation on this, because this wasn't discussed.
Representative Zwanster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can answer a little bit of that. And so, members, you did see a couple of bills that were committee bills from my committee, Labor Health, that did not make it to the floor. This is one of them. And the reason being is we basically took that interim committee bill and looking at some of these upper payment limit, similar shaped programs to the one we were trying with this bill. As you can tell, our Appropriations Committee member mentioned it, but we've had 6-7 years now of language as a footnote in our budget on the upper payment limits in other bills. And so at the request of certain appropriations members saying it's time to get the footnote out of the budget after we've been doing this for 8 years, we're pretty comfortable. We know the money's there. We know how this financial mechanics work. We can just put it in statute. And so that's really what we were hoping to do with this bill. So you'll see that it is an individual member brought bill, but 80% of that language is our interim committee bill, plus the 20% of what we're taking is that budget footnote we've had in our budget for 8 years and just putting in the statute so we no longer have to keep it in the budget year after year.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Stiver. Representative Lloyd.
Thank you. And further explanation to the good representative who served on that interim committee, he'll recall that when at the last meeting where this bill was considered and where I also was asked to present, the Senate chairman asked that because we didn't have, the committee at that time did not have all the information back from the Department of Health on the full-time employee, the assessment, and some of the language on the PRTF language. The only thing they had was the appropriation side that would allow them to incorporate that. The chairman of the Senate Labor Committee asked if we could bring a private bill, and the good member of that committee, remember, he kind of says, do you want to do it or do you want me to? And I deferred to him. He asked me to bring this bill. Upon putting this bill together, in looking at that language in the footnote, because that agency is mine in appropriations, I went to our fiscal people and he says it would really be nice to get rid of this footnote because it's not a requirement of CMS anymore. And so that's the effort on that part.
Representative Stiver.
On and against the amendment, vote no.
Question?
You've heard the motion on the standing committee amendment. Are you ready for the question? Just the question having been called? Nope.
You got to get up there.
Representative Harnack.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'd like to divide this amendment. So I'd like to take the amendment, line 1, 2, and 3, and then line 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20 as one division, and then lines 4 through 15 as the second division. And I'll explain.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Hornock, which, so which one would you like to vote on first?
I'd like to take the first division, lines 1 through 3 and lines 16 through 20 first.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is the amendment we discussed during our standing committee just several days ago. The amendment, what it does is it authorizes a position, but then in lines 16 through 20, it reduces the amount of money from the general fund to authorize that position and cuts it in half, so that half has to be funded from one source, half has to be funded from another source. So that's the first explanation of the first division.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think that explanation is accurate. You'll note that the line that we delete through the 97,000, and we insert in its place the 48,000, and we delete that it's from general fund and we make it from federal funds. So that will biennialize, but it's when they pick this up, that was a biennial number. And so it doesn't now authorize 48 from general fund and 48 from another fund. We delete the general fund section. I would suggest you oppose this division.
Representative Wanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would also suggest I guess I'm a bit confused. So let me tell you what happened in the committee with this amendment, because I'm not sure we're all on the same page. What we've done with the amendment is basically eliminate the general funds out of this amendment, making the department find those general funds and still requiring that same federal match. So by deleting the amendment, you put the general funds back in the bill that are already in the bill, and you're appropriating another 48,000 general fund dollars. So I'm perfectly happy to take it out, but I don't think that was the will of what my committee wanted, including the good bringer of this division. So I would also ask you to vote no, even though I don't think that's what the majority of this body wants to do.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Larson.
Stumbled over on my own feet, Mr. Chairman. We would like to have on Division 1, we would like to adopt this amendment, which, as you see me come before this body, this is not an unusual position for me. I stumble over my own feet. But we'd like to adopt this position, this division, and include the position and the funding associated with it. Question?
Question. You've heard the question on the division number 1. Question being called. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Oppose? Amendment is adopted. We're on division number 2. Representative Hornock.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. The next division is line 4, on the amendment is line 4 through lines 15, which the reason I divided this is because this is not necessarily something that we discussed during our standing committee, so I would like some further information. This does change some things about this bill, and I would like the body to have some further consideration of this portion of the amendment. Thank you.
Representative Larson.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and appreciate the comment because it had to be discussed in committee or it couldn't be a standing committee amendment. And so this is the way, and this happens. This is kind of a good exercise, but the reason I put this in the standing committee amendment is on page 7, it said that the authorization for this new position would only be effective for this act, which meant the upper payment limit for the hospital association, but for the hospitals, I keep saying that association, that's wrong, for hospitals who participate in this. It needs to be expanded so that they can also take care of the similar programs that govern the nursing care facilities and the private ground ambulance provider assessment. So this new position that's going to oversee these upper payment limit programs would be able to not only do the hospital one, but the others as well. I'd encourage an aye vote. Question?
Question being called on division number 2. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Oppose? No. Motion is failed. Division being called. All those in favor, please rise. Please stand still, please. All those opposed? (35 to 26), ayes have it. Motion carries. Division number 2 is passed. Back on the bill. Representative Larson.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think as we get into some of these bills, one of the concerns that we've experienced over the last several years is this is an expansion of Medicaid, and this is an expansion of the ability to, it imposes more strings on the state to, that whatever those perceived strings with Medicaid are. It's really important that you understand that this does nothing to the state's participation in these particular programs. Zippo. The program exists. It's the providers that make an assessment on themselves that comes back and enhances the state's match to where they can capture more federal dollars. Now, if you don't want these providers, if you think that the hospitals are being adequately funded with Medicare reimbursement, as well as everybody else, okay, I get that. But if you think that that reimbursement is insufficient, I would suggest you support this bill and would hope that that helps a little bit.
Representative Hornock.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'd like to speak on the bill, and I would like to ask you to oppose this bill. I just don't believe that this is good practice. We have to draw a line somewhere. This is a tough line to draw because we're dealing with two facilities in Wyoming that take care of very important work. They deal with children, oftentimes children that people don't really want to deal with. So we give them to these facilities, and hopefully these facilities do good work for these kids. It's an important aspect of something, but I'll tell you what. One thing that we heard in committee, we heard, and this is a quote, this is a vehicle for the Lord's work. I don't believe that state government or federal government should be a vehicle for the Lord's work. I believe that it is up to us as individuals to be the vehicle for the Lord's work. That's why I ask you to oppose this. We're on thin ice here a little bit. There's things, if you Google this, there's some I don't know if I can say, if you search for something about this, there's articles that you can find dealing with the fact that the federal government's looking at ways to scale this upper payment limit whole deal back, and even hinting that they might ask for reimbursement of all of their upper payment funds. That would be an incredibly scary proposition. I don't know what's going to happen there, and so that's sort of speculation. However, again, I believe that it's our individual responsibility to take care of these ministries, to take care of these facilities, to take care of our children. Which is why, rather than voting for this bill in committee, I said that I donated my first legislative paycheck to one of these facilities. That is how we need to handle this. It's not up to the state to do the Lord's work. And I ask that you vote against this bill. Thank you.
Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question for the bringer of the bill. Page 2, line 10 mentions private hospitals. I just need to clarify that and make sure I understand correctly, because in Wyoming we have both private and public hospitals. Does this only apply to one or both, or I just need to understand?
Representative Clausen. Or Representative Larson? Yep, Representative Clausen.
Thank you, Chairman. You know, to me, this came out to be a pretty simple bill. Right now, our hospitals are getting $150 per day because Wyoming's paying $75 and the feds are paying $75, but the upper limit is $200. So the hospitals came through and said, we'll kick in an extra $25 a day. The feds will match that, and now these two hospitals that are taking care of our psychiatric patients will get $200 a day, which allows them now to hire more staff. They have beds open, they just can't hire enough staff. And I asked, why are the hospitals willing to kick in the extra $25 per day? And the answer is, it's because the emergency rooms are full, so they can't get in the other patients, and they're trying to take care of these psychiatric patients that they're not qualified for. So the hospitals are just saying, we'll kick in this money to clear out the ER to take care of the patients we need to take care of, and this will open up the beds to take care of this population where they're best treated. So I'm going to ask you to please vote aye on this bill. Thank you.
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I urge a no vote on this bill. I was a no in committee, and I will be a no now. It further intermingles private health care with the federal government and the state government, and for that reason, I stand opposed. Thank you.
Representative Penn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against this bill. So people, this is Medicaid at work here for you. We're sitting here discussing a fix to a problem that's created by Medicaid. The good representative that comes from where the snow falls straight down said himself, excuse me, quote, Medicaid does not reimburse at the level that actually covers the cost. That's what we're dealing with here. We're trying to figure out how we can cover the costs on a program that we've accepted doesn't do that. Why would the question that was just raised, why would the hospitals come up with their own funds in order to raise the upper payment levels? Because if they kick in $25, they get $50 back. So it's a great situation for them, but ultimately we're back to this issue of this is a program that isn't covering our costs. And so remember that, because we likely have another debate on this coming. But I don't think, as has been brought up already, I don't think that this fix is a long-term solution. If the upper payment level is 100 and the state covers, or is 200 and the state covers half of that at $100, saying we can only afford at this time, the state can only afford 75. That's what the state can afford. And so we're trying to find other ways to increase those payments. And it seems like kind of a round and round argument. So I would urge a nay vote on this, please.
Representative Chestick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On and in favor of the bill. In another life, when I was still practicing law, I got involved in several lawsuits where one of the things I had to do was figure out how hospitals are funded and how they make money on some services, lose money on other services. And what I concluded from that litigation was that the services that the hospitals tended to lose the most money on were Medicaid. Medicaid is chronically underfunded. Hospitals provide the service because they're required to, but they are usually losing money on Medicaid. And the testimony I've heard so far here is consistent with that. Medicaid is underfunded. This bill provides a way to increase the federal share of funding for Medicaid. It does not require any state money. It's a creative solution that the hospitals have come up with to increase their reimbursement from the federal government to try and make up some of that shortfall that they suffer. This money is going to go to our rural hospitals, our hospitals all over the state, but the rural hospitals that are really struggling will benefit from this. And anything we can do to make sure that our rural hospitals get adequately funded, I'm in favor of, and I do urge a yes vote on this bill. Thank you.
Representative Alleman.
Mr. Chairman, just this weekend, there's a hospital in the center of the state, and they are not staffed by any doctors in the ICU. And the reason that is the doctors have all quit. We've got some problems in our hospitals that we need to be looking at instead of throwing more money at them. And I also understand that whenever they fire a nurse and hire a traveling nurse, they don't pay that money. It comes from the state. And if that's true, that's just a pretty darn good business plan. Thank you.
Chairman Eklund.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we're kind of faced with a dilemma here. We know that the Medicaid and I believe the Medicare dollars don't cover the costs of treatment by the hospitals or the doctors or anybody involved. It's insufficient. What we're trying to do here is maybe raise that a bit so that it will cover the costs a little more sufficiently. I doubt if it'll be sufficient either. But you got to ask yourself a question, is it better that the hospitals, and I have some small rural ones that I'm interested in, receive no payment at all, or very little payment or less payment, or something that sufficiently covers their costs? And those are questions I think everybody should answer before they vote on this. Right now, I'm in favor of boosting that up so that we don't hear from them saying this won't cover our costs. And on, donating, I think we could donate every legislative salary here for a month and not pay for a small percentage of running one rural hospital. It's expensive, and we've got to keep them alive. We've got to keep them working, and less money from the federal government probably isn't the best solution. I'm in favor of the bill as it stands.
Chairman Zawana, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So there's a lot of comments, I can't fix Medicaid, neither can most of us in this body, right? We are stuck within it. And we can fix it some if you want to raise our Medicaid reimbursement rates, but I haven't seen anybody in this body want to spend 50 or 100 million in general fund dollars to do that. So if we're not willing to do that, no reason to complain about Medicaid and the system we're stuck within. But let me remind you, hospitals can't cover these costs and these patients, right? They are psych patients and they have responsibilities under the Medicaid funding that they have to be treated and diagnosed and sent somewhere. And if they're on Medicaid, there are limited options in the state. There are basically really two outside of a couple of caveats, right? And they're the two facilities we're talking about. And this body is not solving the funding problem. And so the hospitals have come together and said, what can we do, private industry, to help our patients, to help all of our healthcare costs? And this is the answer. They will assess themselves to get these patients out of their emergency rooms, right? If there are not beds available at our psych residential treatment facilities, these patients sit for weeks, right? And they're not being treated, right? We don't have enough adolescent psychiatrists in the state. I think there's less than 6 statewide, and 2 of them don't even live in our state. They come up and visit. So if we don't know what to do with these patients, they are costing us healthcare dollars by sitting in those hospital rooms for weeks or 2 on end. It is in everybody's best interest to get them into treatment as quick as possible, right? And that's what the hospitals are trying to do. They have found a mechanism where they will assess themselves more to help with a funding crunch at our 2 psych residential treatment facilities and get these patients moving to get them the treatment they need. Because otherwise they sit and they cost your healthcare dollars because it costs more money to leave them in the ER or the emergency department day by day, and they're not being treated. I think it's a very simple, easy bill to understand. We're not paying any more state dollars into this. This is the hospitals coming to us saying, you're not solving the problem. We're trying to find mechanisms to make it work. All we have to do is enable it to help them help themselves and help our patients and help reduce the burden of mental health in the state that is costing everybody. And this is a great way forward.
Representative Penn.
Thank you, Chairman. 2 comments. First, I wanted to clarify a misconception that was brought up a few speakers ago, and that this is not applicable, this particular bill is not applicable to all rural facilities. There are 2 facilities in the state of Wyoming that this applies to. I don't think I can say their names here, but they provide psychiatric residential treatment. And so we aren't talking about rural hospitals here. We're talking about 2 facilities in this state. And I forgot my second comment, so I'll be back.
Representative Washop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are talking about 2 facilities. And when you only have 2 facilities, it makes sense that we pay attention to the services provided at the only 2 facilities that provide that type of care in our state. And a question for the sponsor here. It seems to me that if we don't take care of these private entities that are bearing some of the load on behalf of the state, one alternative is that this gets pushed back into the state hospital. I would like to have a little more discussion about the consequences long-term if these private facilities are unable to sustain the work that they do.
Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am not a sailor. I'm a soldier. but I understand a little bit about boats. And I understand that when a boat is sinking, you don't put more cargo on it. We just heard from federal legislators over the last few years about the solvency or the lack thereof of the federal government. This is a real problem as far as I'm concerned. And the more we sit here and just say, well, the feds will take care of it, it's their money. No, it's still our money. And they don't have any more. And the more they print, the worse things get for us. I'm an absolute no on the bill.
Chairman Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few bills and a few issues there that I need to respond to, and I appreciate the good representative from the other side of the Wind River that clarified that this is for that this would increase this program to 2 types of facilities that provide psychiatric treatment. And these are psychiatric treatment for our adolescents. So so how we do that, and this will also go to the good chairman of the judiciary, who said, if these facilities can't take care of them, then perhaps they go to the state hospital. Herein lies the whole problem, is our policy currently really has some huge gaps on how we take care of adolescents with behavioral health needs. Our state hospital doesn't take, for the most part, adolescents. It's an adult. We don't, because you have to segregate, put them in a different facility. So the state has, for the most part, taken these adolescents or children with psychiatric needs, and they put them in a regional treatment facility, which you may have in one of your counties, or if they're acute enough, then they'll go to one of these 2 psychiatric treatment facilities. What we have found over the past few years, that the reimbursement to these facilities for Medicaid patients, and with their staffing problem, they weren't able to keep staff in place, and so they had beds available, but they couldn't take these kids. So then you start looking to place them out of state in other psychiatric treatment facilities. If out of state facilities won't take them, then they come back and they sit in the hospital, or as we've seen in some situations in the state, they sit in the county jail or the city jail, which is inappropriate. So we're trying to bolster, and the hospitals are trying to bolster the foundation of these 2 facilities to where they can take these kids. There was a comment made that suggested that hospitals are firing nurses and then hiring traveling nurses that are therefore paid by the state. There were some ARPA dollars available, or CARES Act dollars available to help fund staffing shortages, but on state general funds, we don't fund in the Department of Health traveling nurses. I think that the point on the low payment, Medicaid payment to providers, really, I think, has been lightly touched on, and I'll just try and put a little icing on it, is that's largely because of our FMAP rate. And when the state doesn't have enough money, that our reimbursement rate, we may not be able to fund it at the available rate. And so then it's not, the feds are saying we can put in more, but state, if you're not going to put in any more, kind of tough rockos. And so then the providers are the ones that suffer. You'll see an amendment in the budget bill that finally adds 25% increase to dentists on their Medicaid reimbursement rate. It hasn't been raised in 15 years. Dentists won't see Medicaid patients anymore because they just can't afford it. So you'll see that coming. Now, I would also agree that taking care of these kids in these institutions and funding is that we should be a vehicle to do the Lord's work. I would only suggest that most of these vehicles must be broken down, because we just are not getting the private funding to sustain these hospitals in a way that they need to be staffed to take care of the referrals to them. That's why the state steps in. if they didn't, if these facilities, and one of them is a religious-based facility, didn't need state funding, and it could be funded solely because we were providing that, that'd be great, admirable, completely, but it's not. And so we're helping it. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I hope that we can help these folks meet some of the shortfall and that they're, by allowing them to participate in this, voluntarily participate in this program, and call for the question.
Are there any other discussions on the bill? Representative Penn.
Thank you. One final thing. The good representative brought up the staffing issues, and that is definitely one of the issues. We have more beds currently available in the state than what we're able to staff. So I asked the representatives in the committee, would this pay increase fix your staffing issues? And they couldn't give me a definitive answer. We think that if we throw more money at a problem such as staffing, then that's suddenly going to fix it. But in this situation, a lot of what's creating there's various things that are contributing to our staffing issue. A large factor is what's come about in the last couple of years with requirements of federal dollars. You have to have this or that in order to be employed. And for some people in the healthcare field, they've chosen to not work. And it's not about the money, it's about the requirements and being able to be employed. And so they couldn't honestly tell me if this increase would help fix their staffing issues, which is one of the biggest issues here as to why they're struggling to provide the beds on and against.
All right, question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Larson's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that bill number 81 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. House Bill 81 has failed. Division is being called. All those in favor, please rise. All opposed, please rise. Yes is 34, noes 24. House Bill 81 has passed the committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill number 21. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 21, sponsored by Agriculture, State Lands, Use of Land Qualification Requirements, an act relating to state lands. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 21, State Lands, Use of Land Qualification Requirements, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Allemand, Allred, Banks, Conrad, Crago, Davis, Eklund, Slagle, Winter. Representative Eklund, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What's your pleasure? Chairman Eklund.
Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 21 do pass. There are no amendments, and I'll turn over the explanation of the bill to my colleague on the east side of the Bighorns, who represents the city named after our state animal.
Representative Crago.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, I bring to you House Bill 21 and ask for your favorable consideration. This is a pretty straightforward bill. What it really does is in Title 36, Chapter 5, we're dealing with state land leases. And there's some language in there regarding grazing and agricultural leases, and in particular, it applies to actual and necessary use for the land. And what we're trying to do with this bill is remove the reference to that type of language within each little subsection of Chapter 5 and put it at the end and essentially say, look, any lease within Chapter 5 has to meet the requirement of actual and necessary use for the land and/or forage. It's pretty simple, straightforward. It's just making a consistency within the language of our current statutes rather than having varying language and not necessarily knowing whether it applies to all of the subparts of the chapter. And I'd stand for any questions.
All right. Question being called. All those in favor of Representative Crago's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, to do so with the recommendation that House Bill number 21 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right. House Bill 21 has passed the committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill number 76. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 76, sponsored by Representative Zawanit Serdan. Licensing Board Amendments, an act relating to professions and occupations. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 76, Licensing Board Amendments. Respectfully report, same back to the House with a recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Angelos, Burkhart, Byron, Larson, Singh, Storer, Western, Winter. Excused, Representative Newsom. Representative Western, Vice Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What's your pleasure, Vice Chairman Western?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion that when the committee of the whole rise to report, to do so the recommendation do pass for House Bill 76. And I will pass off the explanation. And there's a standing committee amendment that I would like to move, and I will pass off the explanation onto the chairman from the capital city.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to present House Bill 76, Licensing Board Amendments. Very simple bill, hopefully, and just some quick background. The Board of Cosmetology, when I was a former chairman of a different committee, came and said, we desperately need a 5-word change to statute. And as the chairman of Legislative Facilities, we did a study about 6 years ago that says every time we draft a bill in this chamber, on average, it costs about $30,000 of state taxpayer money, right? Some are bigger, some are smaller. But it's going through and saying, I don't want to bring a 4-word bill change to the legislature. I went back to our state agency that oversees boards and commissions and said, hey, what other obsolete language, what else can we clean up? We do have, I think, 5 people in our licensing board division that work with all of these boards and commissions, or many of them, and they went to work and checked with all the boards and said, hey, in a perfect world, is there any obsolete language in your Practice Act you would like cleaned up? For those of you new to the legislature, we never open a Practice Act lightly. It's like the one rule, no income tax, and you never open a Practice Act unless absolutely necessary. And so I only opened 24 with this bill all at once. So real quick, most of this is obsolete language, except for the language you'll see on page 3. Make that the top of page 4. When it talks about, it's on line 3, the examination shall be conducted by the board or a majority thereof. And so the Cosmetology Board, this is an actual policy change, and the reason for the bill came and said, in some cases, a cosmetologist will wait up to 2 months before they can actually appear before the board and do the testing requirement, even though the testing requirement is completely online. And so they were hoping to get more cosmetologists into the workforce quicker as soon as their other requirements are completed, and ask for that to be stricken from their Practice Act. I did work with LSO and ANI then to go through our other Practice Acts that had obsolete language that didn't make sense anymore. And so they brought the entirety of this bill to you. Real quick, you'll see some repealers in the end of the bill. If you haven't looked them up already, it's obsolete language in the Board of Nursing, the Ambulance Board, the Water Well Drillers, and the Respiratory Care Act. I would talk about the Standing Committee Amendment at this time, as that is maybe a policy change. The Board of Veterinary Medicine came, they had a December meeting, so not in time for me to put it into the bill. But they came and said if they have a practicing veterinarian in the state who's worked here for 3 years, they should be able to have reciprocity in their license instead of that 5-year window. I think everybody knows we're hurting across the board in a lot of our professions, and so this is one way. Apparently there are some, the veterinary board asked that this reciprocity be extended and moved to 3 years. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on the standing committee amendment, or would move and call for the question on that at this time.
You've heard the motion on standing committee amendment. Are you ready for the question? Yep. Question having been called. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The standing committee amendment number 1 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Okay. Question, do we have discussion on the bill? Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A lot of good things in this bill. There's one question I have on page 9, line 20. It changes the continuing education from 3 years down to 2 years. Now, this would affect someone like me that has a state license and requirement for continuing education. There's many times when I receive some continuing education at the end of my licensure that exceeds what I require, and I'm able to carry that into the next 2 years period. So this could create some concerns from people like myself that are licensed by the state that compacts that within 2 years, and there's no ability to carry over from the end of from one licensure period to the other. So question I have for the bringer is why that was included in this cleanup bill.
Chairman Zwanser.
And Mr. Chairman, that is a great catch that I didn't mention. The reason it's included in my bill and is we'll say a policy change, and not to mention the other body, but there was a bill over there that is apparently now going to continue sitting there where they changed, and this is in the Occupational Therapy Act, is where this license change is. And so I shouldn't say they agreed, but knowing that I could put it in this bill and move it forward, there's not a need for another piece of legislation that may or may not come over. And so I just said, let me throw it in this one because it didn't seem controversial to that board while we were going through every other licensing board.
Okay. Is there any other discussion on the bill? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Zwaneser's motion that the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill number 76 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. House Bill 76 has passed the committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 97. The clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 97, sponsored by Representative Stith. Chancery Court Jurisdiction Amendments. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 97, Chancery Court Jurisdiction Amendments. Respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Henderson, Larson, Nicholas, Sherwood, Stith, Walters, Zwanser. Representative Nicholas, Chairman.
You've heard the pleasure. What is your pleasure, Chairman Nicholas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move when the committee of the whole rise and report, it does so with a recommendation that House Bill 97 do pass. And I'll turn the explanation of the bill and the amendment over to the good representative from the land of the Springs.
Representative Stith.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Members, House Bill 97 would allow a governmental entity, when it's negotiating a contract, to specify the Chancery Court as the venue for disputes if the governmental entity wanted to do that. Right now, they are reluctant to do it because our Governmental Claims Act says that any claim against a governmental entity must be brought in district court. And the specific problem that this bill is designed to solve is for the office where the Treasury is. They have contracts with investment advisors where the state will give these investment advisors a lot of money to manage. It would make sense for them to be able to have a venue clause specifying the Chancery Court in those contracts if, for example, the state wanted to sue that investment advisor for misappropriating or mishandling the funds. Right now, they're reluctant to do so because even if they could specify Chancery Court as the jurisdiction, any counterclaim would have to be heard in district court. Therefore, you'd have two lawsuits about the same thing. That's undesirable. So why Chancery Court? Chancery Court, as you know, is designed to move very fast. It's designed to resolve business disputes. It's a court of limited jurisdiction. Under our current system, these claims, these lawsuits that involve governmental entities have to be heard in district court. And so the case gets put behind all of the other things on the district court's docket, whether that's criminal cases or divorces or Title 25. And so in district court, things tend to move slowly. With respect to Standing Committee Amendment number 1, that restores the original language. The original bill draft, in my view, had an error that the author, that I didn't notice. What the Standing Committee Amendment does is it restores the phrase original and exclusive jurisdiction for any claim will be normally in the district court. So with that, I would move the Standing Committee Amendment number 1 and ask for your favorable consideration.
Question having been called on Standing Commitment number 1. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, we're back on the bill. Representative Stiff.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So without belaboring it, the bill on page 2 provides that jurisdiction for claims against the government will be in district court, except that claims or counterclaims in an action based on a contract entered into by a governmental entity may be brought in the Chancery Court if the contract provides that the Chancery Court shall be the venue for disputes arising under the contract, and the claim or counterclaim is otherwise within the jurisdiction of the Chancery Court. With respect to that last phrase, this claim still has to be within the jurisdiction of the Chancery Court. There's a laundry list of things that the Chancery Court is not allowed to deal with. So, for example, personal injury, wrongful death, landlord-tenant disputes in a residential case, none of that can be heard in the Chancery Court. Chancery Court's limited essentially to a list of actions that are business-related. And I would stand for any questions. Thank you.
Discussion on the bill. Speaker Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So my question is, and I'm not a lawyer, I don't use the Chancery Court, but when we created this court, it was to speed up business, right? In other words, it was to ensure that those things related to business contracts, such, to speed that whole system up for business, not for government. So my question is, have you looked into, which doesn't matter if it's only a few cases, right? So we don't overload a court that was designed for speed. So my question is, do you anticipate a lot of use by government for this, what was intended to be a court for business? So because if there is, then that would require more judges. It could burden the system, which is the reason we pulled the Chancery Court out, was to not burden the system with these, to try to get a fast resolution. So that's my question. Is it going to add a lot more cases, do you foresee? And then the other question is why? Why would we speed it up for these governmental contracts? What's the advantage? And I think I could see some, but what is the advantage to the state of Wyoming to speed up this particular kind of contract? Thank you.
Representative Washup.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm on for this bill. I believe that the expeditious resolution of a dispute is always advantageous rather than leaving it languish for however long while we wait for an answer. This is permissive language. It allows state agencies to use this type of contract when it's appropriate, but they're not mandated to do so. But in those circumstances where getting an answer might make the difference in terms of investment decisions or other critical elements of how we do business on a regular basis, I think an expeditious resolution is to the advantage of the people of Wyoming, and we should support this bill.
Representative Stith.
Mr. Chairman, and thank you, appreciate the questions. The question is, why would you want a faster resolution? Well, typically it depends upon, if you're a party, typically it depends upon whether you think you're going to have to pay money or whether you think you're going to have to get money out of the lawsuit, right? If you think you're going to have to pay money, then you have an incentive to slow things down, right? Right now, so in that particular context where the government thinks that the government agency in its own good faith belief believes it's more likely to be the plaintiff in the case, it would be more attractive to pick Chancery Court. If you think that you're more likely to be the defendant and be sued for money, then you probably won't like Chancery Court. That's why venue clauses are important, because at the outset of a relationship, when you're first negotiating a contract, people don't necessarily know which side they're going to be on. With respect to the volume, it's a really good question, and the short answer is I don't know what volume this would generate. Right now, the Chancery Court has very low volume. The volume is so low that we don't even need a Chancery Court judge dedicated to the Chancery Court. Right now, the Chancery Court responsibilities are divided up among sitting district court judges. I believe there are fewer than, the docket right now is about 20 cases or so, I believe, which is in the court system, not very many. If it would cause higher volume, it should cause some higher volume, but it will happen slowly, because it will only be once you've negotiated your contract, you've put the venue clause in, and then a year later you have some dispute about it. So given that we've had really low volume in the Chancery Court so far, I wouldn't anticipate that it would overload the docket, but it could be beneficial to the state. And again, it's up to each governmental entity to decide in advance whether it wants a clause like this. So please vote aye.
All right, is there any further discussion on the bill? Okay, question being called. All those in favor of Representative Stith's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, to do so with the recommendation that bill number 97 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. House Bill 97 has passed the committee of the whole. I recognize Majority Floor Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the House stand in recess until 2 p.m.
All those in favor of the Majority Floor Leader's motion to rise and sit again at 2 p.m., please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Noes have it. We're going to, committee announcements. Mr. Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I saw
Your
it.
committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, will meet 15 minutes upon noon recess to hear 3 bills. House Bill 56, Purple Star Schools, House Bill 120, Traffic Stops Probable Cause, and House Bill 68, School Zone Crosswalks.
Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your committee number 9 will meet tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. to consider House Bill 91, New Source Shield Law, House Bill 161, Loan Disclosures for Grant Guarantors and Cosigners, and House Bill 190, Wyoming Value Added Energy and Industrial Plan.
Vice Chairman Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your committee number 6, TRW, will meet immediately after we gavel out for lunch, and we will be considering House Bill 104, carried over from last Thursday, House Bill 75, House Bill 147, House Bill 123, and House Joint Resolution 3 if we have time. Thank you.
Chairman Washup.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your committee number 1 will meet tomorrow morning in our regular meeting room at 7:30 to hear House Bill 113, Judicial Permission to Dismiss DUIs repeal, House Bill 126, trespass, removal of trespassers. House Bill 128, voyeurism within enclosed spaces, and if time permits, House Bill 145, disclosure of sensitive information for law enforcement.
Chairman Nicholas? Good?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your House Appropriations will meet on adjournment, continuing with House Bill 120, excuse me, I think it was House number 27. And then we will also hear 183, 184, and 185. Then at noon tomorrow, actually at 1 o'clock tomorrow, because at noon, we'll have a informal meeting going over the CREG with the Joint Appropriations Committee. When that is over at 1 o'clock, we will hear House Bill 124, 195, and 89.
Okay, we'll stand at recess till 2 p.m.